Hello, everyone. Let's discuss paper one from March 2024, AS Sociology. Now, before we begin, a couple of things that I'd like you all to remind yourselves of. The paper structure for both paper one and paper two remain the same. The paper structure, the amount of time you get to attempt your paper, the maximum amount of marks. Uh, yeah. So paper one is of 1 hour 30 minutes. So is paper two. The total amount of marks that you need to work for are 60. The paper is divided into two sections. We have section A and section B respectively. Section A is of 34 marks. Section B is of 26 marks. In section A, you do not get any choice. So as this says, answer all questions. You're expected to answer all questions. So there's no choice. Yes, this would be divided into three questions. Question number one, question number two, question number three. And question number one would not have any what do you call it? Any sub part over there or any division. So there's just one question. Question number two is divided into two parts. You have 2A and 2B. Question number three has two parts. You have question number 3A and 3B. Question number two is typically on research methods. And so is the case with question number five. Question number five, again, is typically on research methods. So, like I said, for section A, you do not get any choice. For section B, you do get a choice. There are two questions, question number 4 and question number 5. From these two questions, you're expected to attempt any one of them. Now, without any further ado, let's quickly begin. This is how your paper would look like. Section A, no choice at all. Section B, you are expected to attempt one question. So the first part over here, for section A, additionally. Okay, for section A, I have put up a video. Like I said, section A is of 34 marks, right? I had put up a video that would show you how exactly can you score a 34 on 34, right? Frequently asked question at this point is, can we get full marks? Oh, yes, you can get full marks. But it's pretty important that you understand and adapt the marking mechanism that is used by the Cambridge, right? Understand it, adapt to it, and then practice it. Of course, it takes efforts, but it is doable. So to begin with, the first question over here reads, describe two types of interviews used in sociological research. Okay, I don't know if I said this earlier, but I just put a link of how you could attempt section A or how you should be attempting section A in the description below. So getting back to this, the first question over here, describe two types of interviews used in sociological research. This happens to be a 4-mark question. Now, to read this, one type of interview is a structured interview. Okay, now many students, they'd ask, oh, sir, do we need to write an introduction? No, you're not supposed to write an introduction. Why is it that I'm discouraging you from writing an introduction over here? Because the question is simply asking you to describe two types of interviews, which is of 4 marks. In other words, you identify the first type and you develop it, you get 2 marks. You identify the second point and you develop it, you get another 2 marks, right? You're not being marked on introduction and you are being timed. Remember, the clock is ticking, right? Take decisions wisely. Take decisions wisely. I wouldn't really advise you to write an introduction to this. So one type of interview is a structured interview. It is also seen as a questionnaire which the interviewer, that is the researcher, reads out and fills in. These interviews involve a preset questions which are usually closed-ended and they're asked in a standardized manner. So some students would at this point want to know how important it is to add this third line. I'd say do it, because you're just ensuring that the 2 marks that are allocated to that first type of interview that you've been asked to describe, you're not losing a mark there, right? So the yellow highlighted part shows you how you receive the first mark. The green highlighted part shows you how you receive the second mark. Moving on really quick to the second type of interview. Another type of interview used in sociological research is an unstructured interview. Now, an interview with few, if any, preset questions, though researchers usually have certain topics they wish to cover. These are more like conversations between the interviewee and the interviewer. I hope you all know the interviewee is the respondent, the person who's being interviewed, and the interviewer is the researcher, right? So I hope everyone gets this. This is how you're getting the first mark, the second mark, the third mark, and the fourth mark, respectively. Let's quickly move on to the second question. The second question reads, explain two ways of achieving reliability in sociological research. Now, understand your command words well. Understand your command words well. This is a command word. What is this question asking you to do? This question is asking you to explain. Explain what? Explain the ways that could be used to achieve reliability, ways that could be used to achieve reliability. And since you've been asked about any two ways, remember this happens to be an 8-mark question. I'd again like to advise you to treat this as two separate questions of 4 marks each, right? You identify the first method, write it, turn it into a paragraph, and you ensure that you're doing whatever is expected from you to do to be able to score 4 marks on this first explanation, and then another 4 marks for the second explanation, right? Again, I'd like to remind you, there's this video present that would show you exactly how to score an 8 on 8. Now, taking this ahead, moving on real quick, one way through which reliability, remember, read out the question again, explain two ways of achieving reliability in a sociological research. One way through which reliability can be achieved is through using quantitative, that is numerical data. So you have identified, I just clean this up so that there's less of clutter. Okay, yeah. Now, one way through which reliability can be achieved is through using quantitative, that is numerical data, right? By using numerical data, you would be able to achieve reliability, right? You've identified the point. Now comes the explanation part. Quantitative data is objective data that can be easily measured and analyzed, which helps to identify trends, thereby increasing reliability. So you have explained what, or you've described what quantitative data is, and you've linked it back to the question, right? For instance, use of official statistics increase reliability as there is no direct bias or prejudice by the sociologists, according to positivists. Of course, when you talk about collecting quantitative data, if you talk about collecting quantitative data according to positivists, if I may give you an example over here, uh, an example of over here could be the usage of official statistics. Official statistics are an example of quantitative data, and because many nations, many countries, when they're collecting official statistics, they have a, a specific criteria that they use. They have their own definitions and operationalized ways through which they collect that data, which can lead to higher reliability, right? So one way through which reliability can be achieved is through using quantitative, that is numerical data. Quantitative data is objective data that can be easily measured and analyzed, which helps to identify trends, thereby increasing reliability. For instance, use of official statistics increases reliability as there's no direct bias or prejudice by the sociologists, according to positivists. Of course, when you talk about using official statistics, because these official statistics, just in case if you do not recall what they are, these are statistics, official statistics, okay? These are statistics that are collected by government organizations for their own use. The statistics that are collected by government organizations for their own use. If later on a sociologist decides to put those statistics to use, they are an example of secondary data, and they're an example of, or they refer to as official statistics, right? Because these official statistics, examples of these official statistics might include birth rate, crime rate, death rate, marriage rate, literacy rate, so on and so forth, right? Because a sociologist himself or herself is not collecting this data, the likelihood of them being biased from the sociologist's end is very low, right? Do you see why it says there is no direct bias or prejudice by the sociologist? Because the sociologist is not collecting that data himself or herself. Now, moving on to the second point. The second way to achieve or increase reliability of a research is by asking close-ended questions. Now, when you talk about asking close-ended questions again are questions where you have limited amount of choice available, right? I think it's written over here. As this reads, close-ended questions are those questions that can be answered with either a yes or no, or you could additionally add on to this when you say close-ended questions. MCQs are an amazing example of close-ended questions. Let's just say you get a question, you have 4 choices beneath, you just pick any one out of those 4, right? So for instance, using close-ended questionnaires as a research method will ensure that the research can be replicated even when it's conducted by another researcher, leading to high reliability. Now, let me just walk you through this real quick. When we speak about collecting data through a questionnaire, right? Let's just say for now, if I'm a researcher, I want to conduct a research, I want to collect my data through a questionnaire. I'll design a questionnaire. I'd get some, let's just say 100 printouts of that questionnaire, and then I'd start distributing them, right? Let's just say I have 100 questionnaires printed out. I start distributing those questionnaires. I'm done with 50 of them. And then I decide someone else. Then I request someone else to continue. Maybe let's just say I'm too tired or exhausted and I request someone else to do this. Do you realize having the same questionnaire designed being given to different people, right? It's the same questionnaire that is being designed, which is being given to different people. Of course, if you're taking out printouts or if you're getting it printed, it's the same questions being asked, right? So if there are same questions being asked, that means there's standardization in terms of how data is being collected. And if there's standardization in terms of how the data is being collected, that eventually would mean that the chances of your questionnaire or the chance of your research being replicable would increase, right? So standardization leads to higher replication leads to higher reliability. Did not get confused between replication and reliability. A research is replicable when you can conduct the research in exactly the same manner again, right? If you're able to conduct the research in exactly the same manner again, you might as well refer to the research being replicable, right? If we speak about a reliable research, what makes a research a reliable research? A reliable research is a research that is conducted more than once in exactly the same manner, and you end up getting the same results. So that is why reliability is also referred to as reliable data is also referred to as consistent data. Consistency in terms of the results or the findings make your research reliable. So I could go on and on, but I don't want to take a lot of time here. I hope you've understood. Okay, now just in case if you think this is too tiny for an 8-mark answer, it's not, right? You want to test it, you test it, you might as well pause this here and try writing this down on your register on your notebook, and you'd realize because this is typed, I have this typed over here because I wanted it to be cleaner, just in case if someone doesn't understand my writing. So if you have this, if you try writing it down on your notebook, you realize the content is not less, and this does cater to whatever you need to be doing to be able to score full marks on this question. Now, taking this ahead, like I had said, question number 2A and 2B, that is question number 2 in total is of 14 marks, where these 14 marks are divided into two questions, that is of the first question being of 8 marks and the second question being of 6 marks. Now, moving on to the second question here. Question 2B reads, explain two limitations of using a covert approach to participant observation. Explain two limitations of using a covert approach to participant observation, or in other words, the examiner wants us, or the paper setter wants us to write down two disadvantages of covert participant observation, right? Covert participant observation. So what is a participant observation? A participant observation is an observation where the researcher, that is the observer, actively participates in the activities of the research that are being what I say. So yeah, a participant observation is an observation where the researcher actively participates in the activities of the group that are being studied, right? When the observer is participating in the activities of the group that are being studied, we refer to that as participant observation, or when the researcher is also involved in those activities. Now, what makes it a covert approach? I see some students, not many, but yeah, I see many students, not, I see some students getting confused between covert and overt observation. Covert comes from the word cover. Cover means hidden, right? So any research or any observation where the identity of the researcher is kept hidden, we refer to that as a covert observation. An observation where the researcher's identity or where the observer's identity is kept hidden, we refer to that as a covert observation. About covert observation, in other words, when the people who being studied or the people who being observed do not know that they're being observed, do not know that they're participating in a research. So we've been asked to explain two limitations. The command word again over here is explain. This is worth 6 marks. and there are two limitations that we are expected to write. Again, the same rule. Consider this as two different questions of 3 marks each, right? Taking this ahead, explain two limitations of using covert approach to participant observation. To begin with, the first limitation of a covert approach to participant observation is that there are many ethical issues. Why an ethical issue? An ethical issue because remember when I said, if the people who are being studied do not know that they're being studied, if the people who are being studied do not know that they're being studied, it would be an example, it would be an ethical issue. It is ethically incorrect, or it is ethically wrong to conduct an observation on people or to observe people without their consent. Now, let's elaborate on this further. Some groups might not want to be studied. For example, members of the Church of Scientology. The Church of Scientology, many of you would be aware. For the ones who don't, you might as well pause this here and Google Scientology. You'd get to know a lot. I think it's interesting. It's very interesting. So once you're done with this video, once you're done studying, or once you do have time, you might as well YouTube Scientology or the Church of Scientology, and there's a lot that you'd learn about this. So the first limitation of a covert approach to participant observation is that there are many ethical concerns. Some groups might not want to be studied, example, members from the Church of Scientology, and conducting an observation without their permission would breach the privacy of many who are being observed. This might end up offending the respondents, and they might want the researcher to discard data collected on them from the study, which would eventually lead to an unrepresentative sample. Let's just say the researcher very carefully chose a sample, right? Let's just say the researcher wants to conduct a research on different religious organizations, different churches. And amongst those different churches, there's this Church of Scientology as well. And just to give you a slight little peek into it, a slight little idea into it, members of the Church of Scientology, they are very secretive about their religion and they don't like being studied, right? So getting back to the example that I was giving you, for instance, if a researcher, let's just say I'm a researcher, I want to conduct a research on different religious organizations, and I very carefully choose a sample of, let's say, 5 individuals from a particular religious organization, right? Now, if the members of the Church of Scientology, they figure out that they're being observed, and they demand that the data that has been collected on them should be discarded. Don't you think eventually, for a researcher who had very carefully chosen a sample of 100 people, now you have data from only 95 people? And if you have data from people that are less than the amount of people that you had initially thought you'd collect your data from, that would make your sample unrepresentative, right? So if it's making your sample unrepresentative, that would consequently lead to lowered generalizability of the findings, right? We use the word representation when we're talking about the sample. We use the word representation when we're talking about the sample. However, when we talk about the findings or the results of research, we typically use the word generalizability. So an unrepresentative sample lowers the generalizability of the findings, right? So taking this ahead, I try not to deviate and just stick to mere explanation of mere explanation of these questions over here. I tend to get carried away. I try not to now. So another limitation of using covert participant observation is that it has a lot of practical issues. It has a lot of practical issues. The first issue that you chose over here was ethical. The second over here is practical. Be clear about what you're writing, right? The words you choose to write, whatever you're writing, there should be clarity there, right? Do not, I say this very often, you cannot bluff around and try to gain marks, right? This might not sound very polite, but I've seen many students doing this. Avoid doing that, right? So if you've been asked to explain 2 limitations, you might as well stick to 2 limitations, because that is exactly what is going to get you marks, right? Now, a frequently asked question at this point is, what if we write more than 2? Don't do that. Again, remember the clock is ticking. Okay, when asked from the examiners, if you ask people from the Cambridge if what is typically their response when someone writes more than they are asked to write. Now, let's just say if there's a student who's written one explanation, second explanation, and then there's this third explanation too. If you ask people from CIE, they'd be like, oh, we'd read them and we'd choose the best. Let me ask you a question. If you were an examiner, why would you want to do something extra? You would not, right? So let's not write beyond what has been demanded from us. So the second explanation to what? The second explanation to the disadvantage or the limitation of using covert participant observation, right? Another limitation of using covert participant observation is that it has a lot of practical issues associated with it as well. One practical problem that a researcher might face is they might not be able to record. They might not be able to record data information properly without revealing the true identity of a researcher. Now, see, remember the word covert. Covert, when I said when you keep your identity hidden. Covert, when I said when the people who are being studied or the people who are being observed do not know that they're being observed. If you are to keep it hush hush, if you are to keep it a secret, don't you think it would be problematic for you to be able to gather data? In most cases, you'd merely have to rely uh, on your memory, right? That would lead to retrospectiveness issues, recalling issues, right? So if I am conducting, if I'm observing someone in a secretive manner, I cannot just pull out my notebook and start taking notes. That it wouldn't work like that. So Irving Goffman adopted the role of assistant. Now I'm bringing in sociological material over here. Irving Goffman adopted the role of assistant to the athletic director in order to study the experience of patients in a psychiatric hospital in Washington, D.C. Situations like these result in the researcher having to be relying mostly on his or her memory, which might not be 100% accurate, leading to low validity of the research. So this is the first limitation. This is the second limitation. Now, I used Irving Goffman over here, and I'm referring to this as a sociological material, right? Let me clarify, sociological material is not always the name of a sociologist. I've seen many students being super scared of this. Sociological material could be anything. It could be a key term, a sociological term. It could be a concept, a theory, a perspective, anything sociological, right? Which also includes the name of a sociologist. It could be any sort of empirical evidence, any sort of statistics. All of this counts as sociological material, right? Now, in the first paragraph, we chose deliberately not to add up a name, and the second paragraph we chose to add up a name just to show you that it is okay not writing a name too, right? As long as you bring in sociological material, it doesn't necessarily have to be the name of a sociologist. Taking this ahead, peer group is the most important influence. Now, this is question number 3, right? So we're done with question number 1. We're done with question number 2. Question number 1 was of 4 marks. Question number 2 was of 14 marks, divided into 2 different questions of an 8 mark and 6 marks. Question number 3 now. Now, for question number 3, what happens is question number 3 has a statement, right? Do you see the statement? My pencil over here is messing up. Okay. So peer group is the most important influence on class identity. This is a statement, right? This is a statement. After this statement, question number 3 has a statement. After this statement, you get 2 questions. The first question is of 10 marks, and the second question is of 6 marks, right? In the first question, you asked to explain this view, or in other words, you need to write down content that supports that view, right? Whatever the statement is, just write down in support of it. Okay. And 3B, for 3B, you are asked to, oh, it's here. For 3B, you're asked to give one sociological argument against that view. Which view? The view on the statement, right? So we'd speak about 3B in a bit. Let's start off with question number 3A. Now, as we speak about question number 3A, let me read out the statement again. The statement reads, peer group is the most important influence on class identity. That is the social class identity, right? Or in other words, now, whatever your mother tongue is, you might as well translate this into the language that you think would help you understand it the best, right? Because we cannot risk it. It's pretty essential that we understand what the statement over here means. This statement over here reads, peer group is the most important influence on an individual's social class identity. Now, about identity, again, it's the most popular topic when it comes to the CIs. I could go on for hours just speaking about identity. But social class identity, or in other words, when you distinguish amongst individuals, or when people in the society distinguish amongst individuals, when you divide individuals, on the basis of their socioeconomic status, right? The elite, the richest, the rich, the mediocres, middle class, the working class, so on and so forth, right? Typically, the social classes that are usually discussed in sociology are the upper class, the middle class, and the working class, right? Now, so how likely is it? Not how likely, but the statement over here reads that it is your peer group. Now, what is the word peer group over here? I mean, peer group is the people of your own age, right? Your people, the people of your own age, they are the most important influence in terms of me defining what social class I belong to, right? If I talk about myself, the social class that I belong to, according to this statement, it is the peer group or the people of my own age. They're the ones who would play the most important role in terms of influencing my social class identity, right? Now, to begin with, we are to explain this view. Again, this is a 10-mark question. Like I typically keep on saying, divide this into two different questions of 5 marks each. It would be easier for you to be able to keep a check on what needs to be done and to be able to score marks and write an answer that is even. Now, what do I mean when I use the word even over here? What I've seen many students doing is they just start off a point and then they'd uh, explain it in a very elaborative manner, right? And then they'd realize, oh, we've written a lot. They'd move on to the next point, and that would be that would have content not even half of what they did for the first point. So you might as well be careful. Now, starting off with this one, it reads, it is argued by many sociologists that the peer group is the most influential factor in shaping a person's social class identity. It is argued by many sociologists, right? You're not taking the blame. You're not making it sound like you believe it in it, right? So it is argued by many sociologists that the peer group is the most influential factor in shaping a person's social class identity. It is believed that peer groups form subcultures, which I'm sure everyone would agree over here. Many one of the ways through which individuals form subcultures is through peer groups too. There are many other ways too, but yeah, the people of your own age, you typically, I mean, if you're hanging out, you typically hang out with people of your own age, right? That's just one example out of many others. So it is believed that peer groups form subcultures based on, now, the subculture you're forming, it is based on mutual beliefs and cultural values due to similar traits which lead them to conform even further to the values to avoid ostracism, further reinforcing their social class identity. Now, I personally think this sentence shouldn't have been as long as it is, but nonetheless, it is what it is. So I'll just try to use this to help you understand this particular answer. So what is being said over here is, it is believed that peer groups form subcultures. When you're forming a subculture, you typically form a subculture on the basis of you holding similar beliefs, mutual beliefs, right? And cultural values. So there's similarity amongst you and the members of your peer group in terms of the beliefs you hold and the cultural values that exist due to similar traits, which leads to, now when there's so much of similarity, this leads to individuals confirming even further to the values of a particular society. Right now you're confirming even more to the values of the society, or let's just say to that particular subcultural group, right? To avoid ostracism. Now, what does the word ostracism mean over here? Ostracism, or when you're alienated, when you're left out, right? When you are excluded from a particular social group. So you show conformity towards a value system, towards the beliefs, towards the cultural values of a particular subculture, because you do not want it, because you don't want to be kicked out of that group, right? Now, further reinforcing their social class identity. This can be illustrated through the study conducted by Paul Willis. Now, this is a classic study. Paul Willis, for the ones who know, for the ones who don't, I'll just walk you through this real quick. Paul Willis Paul Willis is seen by many as a neo-Marxist too. Paul Willis conducted a research on a school that was located in a working class area in London, right? So there's this gentleman with the name Paul Willis. He conducted a research on a school, right? A research being conducted on a school. Where was the school located? The school was located in a working class area. Remember, I'm bringing in social class over here. A working class area. If you talk about a school that is located in a working class area, common sensual point, but school that is located in a working class area, it's highly likely that the individuals that would be attending that school would be from working class too, right? So get the hint from there. Now, Yeah, Paul Willis conducted a research in the 1970s on a school in London from a working class area. Now, uh, in his research or through his research or during his research, his focus was on 12 boys, 12 young boys who were not the very studious ones, who were the mischievous ones, who were racist, they were sexist, they would be proud of bunking classes, they would be proud, or they'd boast about the amount of time they'd spent uh, without putting their pen to paper. And these were kids who were not very enthusiastic about academic qualifications, to make it simple. Right now, this is the research we're talking about over here. So this can be illustrated through the study conducted by Paul Willis on a school located in a working class area in London. He studied 12 boys known as the lads. These boys acted in a non-conformist and deviant manner, as they knew that the social class they belonged to would hold them back from joining high status professions. Now, let me add up a bit more to Willis's research, just in case you aren't really familiar with this. So these 12 young boys, whom we're referring to as the lads, according to Paul Willis, these young boys, they realized, or they were able to see through the smoke screen. They realized that regardless of the amount of efforts they put in, they wouldn't really be able to get a high status job. Why not? Because in the UK, there's you get educated for free till you're 16 years old, right? After that, it's your parents' pocket that matters. So according to these boys, even if they did put in efforts, they would be able to just achieve qualifications or attain qualifications that are offered for free. What after that, right? And that wouldn't really help them get a job with enough of prestige and status that would improve their social position within a society. So according to these young boys, according to according to Paul Willis, these young boys, they were not ready to put in efforts when it came to academics, because they felt like even if they did put in efforts, it wouldn't really help them much. They'd end up getting clerical jobs, which they found to be very sissy and very feminine. Remember, these young boys, they were sexist and racist and a lot more, right? So these young boys, based about now, what we're trying to explain over here through this research is, see how the social class identity that these young boys eventually did have, right, when they got through with the school, and when they joined manual work, when they started working at factories, it was the peer group or the people around them, or the people of similar age around them, that influenced the social class identity, leading them to eventually end up doing things or doing jobs that no one would ideally want to do, right? Being involved into manual work and all. So this can be illustrated through the study conducted by Paul Willis on a school located in a working class area. He studied 12 boys known as the lads. These boys acted in a non-conformist and deviant manner, as they knew that the social class they belonged to would hold them back from joining high status professions. Consequently, they considered manual labor more satisfying and manly. Due to the social class they belong to, the society is going to treat them as lowly creatures. Therefore, being deviant was the only way to escape inequality, according to them, which led to them perpetuating their social class identity even further. In this way, this study by Willis demonstrates how peer groups can help reinforce social class identity. So the peer group they belong to, their friends, the fellow lads, they were the ones that further perpetuated this division in terms of social class identity. Now, moving on to the next point. Moreover, it is also argued that peer groups influence social class identity through their value system. Now, the value system that these peer groups hold, right? Now, many sociologists claim that students from middle class. Now, let's talk about the students from the middle class over here. Many sociologists, now we'd eventually speak about Barry Sugarman, who conducted his research in the 1970s. But yeah, about let me walk you through Barry Sugarman's research as well. According to Sugarman, the attitude that individuals carry, the value system that they're a part of, again determines what their outlook would be like, and the output and the outlook and their outlook they hold, or the view or the opinion that they hold about the education system, which would consequently or would eventually determine what social class they'd end up being a part of. So, moreover, it is also argued that peer groups influence social class identity through their value system. Many sociologists claim that students from the middle class possess sophisticated values. They're more self-oriented. Now, you all, uh, I mean, you do care about your friends, but when you have your paper, you want yourself to do good. I'm not saying you don't want your friends to do good, but more than them doing good, you're more concerned about your own future, right? That makes you self-oriented. So they're more self-oriented and follow a more individualistic approach and hence focus more on academic qualifications. Therefore, they befriend people of a similar nature and this helps them create a differentiated identity. In contrast, in contrast, the working class pupils, they often try to gain symbolic capital by wearing, let's just say, flashy clothes and standing out, right? For them, how they look like, their demeanor, that matters more, right? So they want to, yeah, they want to show that they're doing good, or they want to show that I mean, for them, if I put it in a more simplistic manner, for them, more than their academic qualification, more than them having to put, or more than them putting in efforts to gain academic qualification, for them what matters more is how they look, how they appear to be in front of others. So in this is just one example. You could use any other reference, you could use any other example, right? This is just to help you understand this question paper and the answer or the content that has been written over here. So in contrast, the working class pupils often try to gain symbolic capital by wearing more flashy clothes and standing out. According to Barry Sugarman in 1970, okay, now at this point, there are many students that would be like, hey, do we need to learn dates? It's on your discretion, depends on how well you want to score, right? So if there's someone who's scored in the top band, if there's student A who scored in the top band, and if there's student B who scored in the top band too, and if student A did end up writing down all the dates and student B did not end up writing down all the dates, of course, student A would get an upper edge, right? I'm not saying this is the only defining factor, but this is one factor amongst many others too. So, according to Barry Sugarman in the year 1970, working class individuals follow a more fatalistic approach, right? When you're more fate oriented, right? When instead of putting in efforts yourself, you rely more on fate, right? So Sugarman believes working class individuals follow a more fatalistic approach and they seek immediate gratification rather than deferred gratification. What is the difference between deferred gratification and immediate gratification? An example of deferred gratification is let me explain you what this is let me explain you what this is. Deferred gratification is when you delay the gratification and satisfaction, right? Immediate gratification is when you want to do it right away. For instance, an example of deferred gratification over here is you sparing time to watch this video. You're watching this video because you want to understand what I'm trying to explain, because a part of you believes that the stuff that I'm saying over here might help you score better in your examination. Now, it's not only about me talking about an answer to a particular question. There's a lot more that I am bringing in over here as well, which regardless of what questions you have in your examination is going to help you. So that's an example of deferred gratification. You could just close this right here and go start playing a video game. That would be an example of immediate gratification. So immediate gratification is getting immediate satisfaction. Deferred gratification is when you're delaying it. You're delaying it because you have a purpose. You're delaying it because you have a goal. You're delaying it because you want a better future. So moving on. According to Barry Sugarman, working class individuals follow a more fatalistic approach and they seek immediate gratification rather than deferred gratification. This leads them to have a collective identity which they associate with their peer group and hence influence their social class identity. So these two examples, like I said, these two points that you used over here to explain how your peer group could be the most important influence on social class identity. Let me re-say this. You do not necessarily uh, need to write these references that are written over here. For many of you, you might not even be aware of Paul Willis and Barry Sugarman. Do not worry, it is okay. You might have studied any other reference. You can't think of a name, it's still okay. You stressing out at this point wouldn't really help you. So use any sociological material, which does not necessarily have to be the name of a sociologist. So I believe we're done with the question number 3A. Moving on, question number 3B. Again, question number 3B is of 6 marks. It's the same statement. The statement over here is peer group is the most important influence on social class identity. Now for this one, using sociological material, give one argument against this view. Give one argument. I repeat one. I'm repeating it for the third time. One. The examiner wants you to use only one argument. Please refrain yourself from please avoid using more than one arguments. You've been very clearly asked. I think it would be, yeah, look at this. The examiner has put this in bold. I mean, yeah, they're requesting you to not exceed this, right? You wouldn't want to annoy them. And again, you do not want to write two or give two arguments against and try to confuse examiner. Confusing the examiner is never going to help you. I'm saying this because I know this. Okay. Now, moving on. Using sociological material, give one argument against this view. Many sociologists believe that education plays the most important role in influencing an individual social class identity. Hold on. Over here, we spoke about the peer group playing the most important role. And because we have to write down against the argument now, we're talking about how the education that an individual has could be playing the most influential role in terms of determining the social identity of an individual, right? So many sociologists believe that education plays the most important role in influencing an individual's social class identity. Functionalists like Parsons believe that now functionalists, I'm assuming everyone knows functionalism. Another thing, important thing, so yeah, when you speak about functionalism, do we need to bring in perspectives? In paper one, no question would ask you or no question would demand uh, excessive amount of information or details on perspectives, right? You must have come across many marking schemes that very clearly state that even if you're not bringing in sociological perspectives, you can still score full marks, right? This happened. This happened in 2021. In 2021, when the CI very clearly specified that students would be tested on perspectives in paper two, that is family. This is paper one here, right? Nonetheless, as you've prepared for paper one, you must have, let's just say, partially prepared for paper two as well. So if you're aware of perspectives, you might as well use them, right? If you write them, you'd get credit for them, but if you do not write them, no one's going to penalize you. Now, moving on, many sociologists believe that education plays the most important role in influencing an individual's social class identity. Functionalists like Parsons, believe that the education system plays the role of a bridge between an individual and the society at large. So, according to Parsons, the education system or education plays the role of a bridge between an individual and the society. So, the education system, actually, according to Parsons or according to functionalists, it trains you to fit into the society well, right? The education system would train you to be able to fit into the society well. So, taking this ahead, through academic qualifications, the education system provides an individual an opportunity. The academic qualifications you have, they provide you with an opportunity to experience upward social mobility. Upward social mobility, for the ones who do not know what the word social mobility over here means, social mobility is when you're moving up or down the social scale. When you're moving up or down the social scale, or in other words, when you are getting richer or when you're getting poorer. When you're getting richer or when you're getting poorer, right? So, however, sorry. However, when we use the word social mobility, we typically refer to upward social mobility because no one wants to experience downward social mobility. So, through academic qualifications, the education system provides an individual an opportunity to experience upward social mobility. Now, a major reason why many of us are attending school or are studying this because your parents, of course, and you also believe that these academic qualifications, they would help you raise your social class, would help you earn more money and improve your social position within the society. So through academic qualifications, the education system provides an individual an opportunity to experience upward social mobility and define their social class identity by encouraging students to strive for high levels of academic attainment and by rewarding those who succeed. Now, rewarding those who succeed, you do this, you do this paper well, and you do your paper too well as well. That would mean you'd get a good grade. A good grade means better results in A2. Better results in A2 means a good university. A good university means the chances of you experiencing uh, better life chances would increase. The chances of you doing well in life would improve, right? So by rewarding those who succeed, schools foster the value of education in determining an individual's social class identity by placing individuals in the same situation in the classroom. Now, when a teacher teaches, now I'm trying to explain this to you. I mean, you could watch this, anyone, any of your friend could watch this. Even if there are what 200 people who are watching this, I'm trying to explain. I'm providing everyone with the same opportunity. Everyone is in the same situation, right? So when you're in a classroom and the teacher's teaching, whatever the teacher's teaching, everyone is being given the same opportunity to do well. The ones who would put in effort would, of course, uh, get better grades. Better grades, like I said, better universities. Better universities means better life chances. So by placing individuals in the same situation in the classroom and so allowing them to compete on equal terms in examination. Now, all of you, you'd sit for the same examination. Depending on the zones you belong to, of course, zone, there's and now this paper that I am using over here to explain these topics to you is from March 2024. And we all would know that March papers are the papers that are conducted in India. Pakistan falls into zone 4, and Middle East falls into another zone. So yeah, depending on the zone you belong to, everyone would give the same paper. So, so allowing them to compete on equal terms in examination, schools foster the value of equality of opportunity that again helps individuals attain their desired social class position or decide the social position within the society or desired social class. So this was a statement. Question number 3, like I said earlier, you get a statement. Right after the statement, you get a 10-mark question where you expected to explain the view. And then after that, you get a 6-mark question when you are expected to give one argument against. So the statement again read peer groups. Peer group is the most important influence on class identity. We use 2 paragraphs to explain this. And then we took a U-turn and we uh, started writing down about how the education system that plays the most important role in determining or in influencing your social class identity and not your peer group. So yeah, this was question number 1, question number 2, and question number 3. Let me remind you all, these all 3 of these questions that we just spoke about, that I tried explaining you. I don't know to what extent did it help you or did it not. I mean, I tried. So this is worth 34 marks. You do not get any choice. And once you're done with this, you move on to section B. Okay, now what is the amount of time that you should keep in your mind when attempting section A? Remember the formula when I had said the total amount of marks multiplied by 1.5. So I'm not very good with math, but 34 plus, I believe, 17 more would make it around 40, say 50 minutes. So yeah, 50 minutes. Yeah. So you shouldn't take anything more. You shouldn't be taking more than 45 to 50 minutes to be able to get done with section A. You should be able to ideally in 45 minutes, because then you'd have more time to spend on section B, and towards the end you'd have some time on you to read through the answers that you've written as well. So section B, again, in section B, we get a choice. The question, there are 2 questions over here. You are asked to either attempt question number 4 or you asked to attempt question number 5. This, we have a very clear instruction over here that reads answer 1 question in this section. So you might as well pause this video here and read both of these questions thoroughly. Read both of these questions thoroughly and ask yourself, what question would you have attempted had you been a student who would have had these questions in the examination? So 2 questions, question number 4 and question number 5. Pause this right here, read both of them at least thrice. Now, I hope everyone's done reading through both of these questions. You're done reading through both of these questions. I'm too used to using the word everyone's done because of the colleges we teach at. So yeah, uh, it's pretty essential that you make a wise decision. I've come across many papers where I see students filling out a script, writing an entire page and then cutting it and then starting another question, right? So before you start attempting this question, you read both the questions uh, at least thrice. Do not fall into or do not be a victim to a situation where a student feels like the question is easy and then midway through they realize it's not. Don't do that to yourself. Question yourself, do you have enough points in support of the argument, and do you have enough of points against the argument? Because the question is asking you to evaluate, and these questions in section B they refer to as evaluative essay questions. Why an essay question? This shows you, yeah, it's a 26-mark question, and you are graded on the basis of AO1, AO2, and AO3, which I keep on telling you about. AO1 is knowledge and understanding, AO2 is interpretation and application, and AO3 is analysis and evaluation. So this is the criteria that the examiner uses to grade you. You are marked on the basis of levels in this particular question. When you're reading a question, question yourself if you know enough of points to write down in support and against. Do you have enough of sociological material? Will you be able to develop that material, right? Just because something is occurring to you at that particular moment, that doesn't at all mean you'd be able to elaborate on it or develop it too, right? So be wise, act wise, and think before you decide. Additionally, do you have sociological material to add on to the answer that you're writing? Because without sociological material, an answer can be written merely on the basis of common sense too. So you need to stand out, you need to differentiate, you need to show the examiner that you are a sociology student. So you very carefully weigh down the amount of points you have in support and against for both questions, and then you decide what to do. Preferably brainstorm, right? I strongly recommend, I strongly advise my students to brainstorm because it helps you write an answer in a more organized manner. So evaluate the view that ethnicity has little influence on identity today. So before I proceed with this, another thing, we do not have any paper, we do not have any answering format that is advised by CAIE. I'd like to repeat that. We do not have any advised format that is prescribed by the CAIE. However, as a teacher, many teachers do. I mean, I do that to my students too, when I ask them to when I suggest that they use a particular format when they're answering this question. That's again on the discretion of the teacher, and it has got nothing to do with the CI. If it has got nothing to do with the CI, why is it that the teachers advise or suggest students to use a particular format? I do that because I believe that would help students write in a more disciplined manner. So a disciplined and well organized answer is of course better than an better is of course a better answer as compared to an answer that you just started writing just by the way. So moving on, I'd like to explain this first question to you. Evaluate the view that ethnicity has little influence on identity today. Identity, my dear, is the most popular topic when it comes to paper one. Have a look at the markings, have a look at the past papers. You probably do have an idea about this. You have had the amount of questions you've had on identity are more than the amount of questions you've had on on any other topic. So identity being there. Number two, evaluate the view that practical factors are the most important influence on choice of research method. On the choice of research method, this question number five, this typically is on research methods. Question number five is typically on research methods. So again, it depends on your preparation. There's a possibility that you prepared yourself or you learned a single answer from research methods, and that happened to be a part of your examination. Probably your mother prayed a lot and it was a lucky day for you. I mean, this is always a possibility. It again depends on the topic you prepared yourself for. So taking this ahead, moving on to section B. Evaluate the view that ethnicity has little influence on identity today. Evaluate the view that ethnicity has little influence on identity today. Ethnicity has little influence on identity today. You are expected to evaluate this, right? Write down in support of this statement, write down against the statement. Now, ethnicity has little influence, has little influence. So when I start writing in support of this argument, I'd start writing down about how ethnicity is losing its significance, or the amount of distinctions that individuals used to have amongst themselves. It is getting blurred. It is disappearing from the society, or ethnicity is perhaps no more an identifying factor that individuals would use to define themselves or to identify themselves. So let's begin with an introduction here. An individual's identity is influenced by many factors. You identify yourself through your age. You're a teenager, right? Your gender, you're a male or a female, the social class you belong to, your ethnic origin. So an individual's identity is influenced by many factors, including age, gender, social class, and ethnicity. Some sociologists argue that although other factors are important influences, ethnicity influences a person's identity the most. However, critiques argue that due to increased choice, an individual's ethnic identity is becoming blurred. This essay will critically evaluate whether this notion of blurring identities is true or not. To commence or to begin with, due to digitalization, globalization, glocalization, digitalization. This is a perfect example of digitalization, what I'm doing right now. I am trying to explain this to you digitally. You doing this, you're probably viewing this through your laptop, your iPad, or maybe your cellular phone, right? So due to digitalization, there has been an increase in newer identities as the world is shrinking, right? Because of digitalization, people have more of exposure. The amount of exposure people have today is a lot more than the amount of exposure people used to have back in our days, right? So to commence, due to digitalization, there has been an increase in new identities as the world is shrinking. How is the world shrinking? I've seen people in my country uh, following the K culture, K dramas, K music, Korean, right? So again, this because all of this is possible just because of digitalization. So cultures which were once seen as a representation of a single ethnic group are now witnessed in individuals from multiple ethnic origins, right? So cultures which were once seen as a representation of a single ethnic group. Now, for instance, K drama, K music. What is the name again? Uh, BTS, right? So it was a representation of a single ethnic group. Today, these are being you witness them in individuals from multiple ethnic groups. For instance, the American way of dressing is now common in almost every part of the world, and people cannot, where they go, and people cannot distinguish each other based on their clothing style. Similarly, many cultures are now adopting styles and traits of other cultures by picking and choosing what fits in their own values. Picking and choosing. Do you smell postmodernism here? Postmodernism. You want to write, you write. You don't want to write, it's on your discretion. You want to use postmodernism as a separate point, you have that option too. So similarly, many cultures are now adopting styles and traits of other cultures by picking and choosing what fits in with their own values. McDonald's being consumed in India through if I'm not mistaken, they call it the tiki burger. Yeah. So burgers are supposed to have meat, right? Because of a vegetarian population having majority in India, you see aloo tikki burgers in McDonald's in India too. So that's just one example. We have another example that is in terms of the American way of dressing. I initially give you an example of K dramas. I mean, use whatever example you want to, but explain it, elaborate it, right? You think, trust me, you'd know how to elaborate it. You just pause. You just, while writing, you just hold your pen down for 5 seconds and you'd be able to think of something, right? Don't rush. When I say don't rush, but at the same time, keep a check on the time, right? So this phenomenon is known as glocalization. Glocalization. Through this, many ethnic identities are blurring, and individuals no longer Through this, many ethnic identities are blurring, and individuals no longer adhere to one particular ethnic value, resulting in blurred ethnic identities. Therefore, it can be argued that ethnicity no longer influences the identity of individuals. However, recent stats, now this is on your discretion again, this last two lines that you see over here. So what has been done over here is a point has been picked, and then that particular point has been developed, and then sociological material has been provided. Sociological material has been provided. Towards the end, you're just showing the examiner. You're just giving the examiner a hint that you being a sociology student, you just don't give into things very easily, and you know that if there are people in support of an argument, there would be people against it as well. So is this many students refer to it as a counter thesis? Is this a counter thesis? No, this is not a counter thesis. You just hinting the examiner. You're just hinting the examiner that you're aware that you could write you're aware that whatever you've written over here is not concrete, and there's a loophole to this as well. So you're showing the examiner. However, recent stats from Statista, it's an amazing website. You type Statista and you'd come across statistics from the whole world, your country too. So however, recent stats from Statista claim that around 1/3 of the world's population doesn't have access to the internet, right? I'd want you to see, if you're writing this is from Statista, I'm sure learning the name Statista is not difficult. You've written around 1/3. No one's asking you about the exact count. No one's asking about exact count. So act smart, play smart. Recent stats from Statista claim that around 1/3 of the world's population doesn't have access to the internet, right? Remember when we initially said digitalization is playing an important role. Digitalization works where you have access to the internet. What about the people who do not have access to the internet? How do you think they'd be affected? In that case, their identity would, or in that case, the significance that in that case, the significance the ethnic identity once did have would still continue to exist, right? So however, recent stats from Statista claim that around 1/3 of the world's population doesn't have access to the internet. So does, now you're questioning, so does globalization and digitalization affect those 1/3 in the same manner? Question mark. Now, I've deliberately put this over here. There are many students who would be like, oh, can we put up a question mark? Oh yes, you can. That there's no one who said you cannot, right? At least the CI hasn't said that you cannot. So moving on. Another thing, I really advise students to use block paragraphs. What is a block paragraph? You write a paragraph, you leave a line, right? That makes it look neater. And especially for paper A, for section A, you're able to show the examiner that, remember, there were questions where they kept on asking about two things. You showing the examiner, oh, I'm done with the first thing, and now I'm moving on to the second one. For this particular evaluative essay 26 mark question, again, using block paragraphs is, I'd love to use block paragraphs, and I strongly recommend that you do that too. The next point related to what? Evaluate the view that ethnicity has little influence on identity today. So you're supporting the idea that ethnicity has little influence in terms of shaping your identity today. Next, some sociologists believe that ethnicity no longer influences individuals, as individuals today are not strictly adhering to their own value system. To what extent do you think people are adhering to their own value system today is a question mark. Instead, they try to take on the belief of the dominant group of a society, the dominant group within a society, dominant group. Now, by and large, we see the world being obsessed towards the Western culture, Western imperialism, by and large. I'm not saying you do, I do, but by and large. I know there are many countries who very strictly refrain from this, but yeah, by and large, we see individuals across the globe adapting to the European or the American culture, right? The Western culture. Instead, they take on the beliefs of the dominant group to fit in better with others. This fear of ostracism leads to the dilution of their own personal ethnic backgrounds. When you are trying to copy others, when you're trying to be like others, your own ethnic identity is getting diluted, right? So the fear of ostracism leads to the dilution of their own personal ethnic backgrounds, falling victim to Western imperialism, which, according to Fanon, is a threat to the minority ethnicity, right? Which is a threat to your own cultural values, which again is a threat to your own way of life, which again is a threat to your own uh, culture, your norms, your traditions, so on and so forth. Here you go. So, Fanon further develops this idea by proposing the notion of the white mask. You might as well pause and just Google white mask, you'd understand it right away. This is when non-white individuals start adopting the dominant group's style and culture to be able to blend in and avoid racism, right? To be able to blend in and avoid racism. Since the dominant culture is, in most cases, is a white culture, hence named the white mask. This idea perpetuates the notion that ethnicity no longer influences individuals, as there are a variety of ethnic identities to choose from. Even if the choice is forced upon the marginalized group, however, even if the choice is forced upon the marginalized group, in some countries, individuals are forced into this as well. For instance, uh, in France, women were not allowed to do Muslim women. They were not allowed to do hijab, and there was, uh, I'm sure many of you would be aware of this. If you are not, again, digitalization, Google it and you'd find out. So you're being forced to give in. The marginalized group. What does the word marginalized mean? Marginalized group is the least powerful group or the powerless group in a society. Why the word marginalized? Because if you are ever to draw a margin, let's just say this is a page, if you're ever to draw a margin, you'd always draw it towards a corner, right? A margin is always towards a corner. So a marginalized group is the group that has been pushed towards a corner. A marginalized group is a group that is yeah, pushed towards a corner, and a powerless group within a society. So ethnic minority groups are typically seen as members of marginalized groups. So this was one explanation. Here, this was an introduction, right? This is an introduction, explanation number one. Number two, moving on. Do you see a particular point is chosen very clearly, and that particular point is developed on, and then sociological material is added to into it, and that sociological material is linked to the wordings of the question? That's what I'd expect, or I'd advise that you do. If you have a better plan, a better way to go about with it, of course you can. Um, there's always a possibility that you could think of something better. So moving on. Moreover, the third point, moreover, with the increase of migration, right? You've seen there's been a lot of migration in the last 10 years, 15 years lately. So moreover, with increase of migration, whether it is due to increased social mobility or to escape hostility, biracial identities have seen an increase in individuals from different ethnic backgrounds come together, resulting in the children having dual ethnic identities. Again, a sentence that is longer than it should have been, but I'd walk you through this. So today you've seen there are a lot of people who migrating from uh the countries of origin to a country that is doing better economically, at least because they want to secure their future, because of a welfare state, could be any other reasons, right? So they're either doing it because they want to increase social mobility, they want to increase their social position, they want to increase their standard of living, or in some cases they end up having to do that because of hostility to the to members of their own ethnicity in the country that they belong to. There are biracial identities that have increased today. Biracial identities, when you're moving from one country to another, if you're not going abroad and marrying, probably your kids would, right? That would. And if your kid ends up, let's just say if you're a Pakistani, you move to the UK, and your kid ends up, a far-fetched example, but yeah. So you move to the UK, and then you get married to someone from the UK, let's just say, who is not a Pakistani, and then you have kids that would be biracial, right? So biracial identities have seen an increase in as individuals from different ethnic backgrounds come together, resulting in their children having dual ethnic identities, right? Moving on. This diaspora might even lead to children and young adults having difficulty in identifying themselves, as they might not fit into either of the ethnicities. Now, East African nations, if you do not know who they are, uh, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of UK, right? So that's an example of. No, wait, Sunak has an Indian wife. Yeah, he has an Indian wife. That example doesn't really work. And another example of this would be, uh, Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, biracial kids, right? Now, for instance, yeah, so let's stick to the example that we have over here. For instance, a Blasian, that is a black and Asian person, might feel diasporic as they might be too black for the Asian culture and too Asian to fit in with the black culture. Read it again, you'd like this. This might lead them to adopt a completely different identity, such as following the American way of living. Therefore, it can be argued that ethnicity is no longer an influential factor in determining one's identity. However, do you see, you're writing whatever you're writing, and of course, context of the question, and then you're ensuring through, have a look at this blue line. You're ensuring that you're taking the examiner back to the question. A typical mistake that I see students making is they just pick on some keywords from the question and then they start writing a summary to that topic. No, this you've never been asked to write a summary to a topic. You have been asked to answer a question. Uh, while you're answering a question, remember while you're answering a question, while you are writing a particular paragraph, at the beginning of a paragraph, at the end of a paragraph, try going back and reading the question. Trust me, this trick works. Go back, read the question again. That would help you keep the reader connected to the question, right? Keep the reader connected to the question. However, according to Sandset, despite the attempts to blend in, even biracial and post-racial identities attract racism in school because of an individual's skin color. Again, these two lines, you're again hinting the examiner that you wrote whatever you wrote, which made sense, but at the same time, you have a sociological reference to something that doesn't approve of what you had written earlier too. So, furthermore, postmodernists. Now we're moving on to the. I'll just show you the introduction paragraph. Then one paragraph in support, two, three, four. Right. Okay. Now, do we have any CI prescribed paragraphs that we need to be writing? No, like I said earlier, there's nothing prescribed by the Cambridge. So if your teacher is asking you to write according to a particular format, like I said earlier, your teacher just wants you to be more disciplined, which is a very good thing, but the CI does not say anything like that. Moving on. Furthermore, postmodernists disregard meta narratives. Postmodernity, you need to know postmodernity if you are to understand this. So, postmodernism disregards meta narratives. A narrative is a story, a meta narrative is a bigger story, and in this context. So, furthermore, postmodernists disregard meta narratives and claim that there's no absolute truth to an individual's identity. There's no absolute truth to an individual's identity. For instance, if there's someone who's born in Pakistan, moves to Canada, in a couple of years gets a Canadian passport, that would make you a Pakistani and a Canadian, right? So there's no absolute truth to an individual's identity. Again, this example, the second example that I'm trying to give you, works more in the Western part of the world. Individuals' gender identities we see or we've studied in sociology as well, they're not fixed today. So, furthermore, postmodernists disregard meta narratives and claim that there's no absolute truth to an individual's identity, be it ethnic or otherwise, right? Be it ethnic identity or otherwise. According to sociologists like Lyotard, ethnic identities are mere meta narratives, and an individual should not confine themselves to a narrow paradigm. Instead, they should explore different possibilities and alternate identities, such as picking and mixing different aspects from ethnic cultures to suit themselves. According to postmodernist perspective, you do you. You do whatever suits you. You do whatever you think works the best for you. You choose a identity that works, that you think would suit you well, right? According to the postmodernist perspective, individuals pick and mix things, right? You pick up a particular part of the identity. You pick up, let's just say, a particular component from a country in the West, and then you adapt to something from the Middle East, and then any Asian country, so on and so forth. So you're picking and mixing things that are together, making up a new identity for you. So, yeah. Therefore, it can be said that ethnicity no longer plays an important role as an influencing factor, as there are multiple choices available for individuals. However, as Stuart Hall argues that despite of ethnic identities changing over time, their influence remains throughout an individual's life. So Stuart Hall, you'd know about him more when you'd be studying media in A2. So yeah, we are done with we're done with writing down uh, content in support of the argument. We now move on and write down about content against this argument. Now, taking this ahead, in contrast, the argument presented above in contrast to the argument presented above, many sociologists posit that ethnicity still has, now you're writing an antithesis, right? You're writing against this argument. Ethnicity still has a lot of influence on one's behavior, and it influences an individual's social identity as a whole. According to many sociologists, such as Bruce, individuals who belong to marginalized ethnic groups use religion as a coping mechanism, and they use religion to maintain their culture and ethnic values. This viewpoint is supported by Jacobson, who conducted research on hijabi women in the UK and found that they felt empowered to wear a hijab in a non-Muslim country, as it helped them maintain their ethnic identity or religious identity, or you could write religious/ethnic identity. This view rejects the notion that and ethnicity no longer influences identity. I just saw that I've taken a lot of time and just quickly try to wrap this up. Now, moreover, another way ethnicity can influence a person's behavior is through the family structure. Now, your family structure, the family dynamics, there are certain types of families that are allowed in one country, one society, one culture, and there are others that are not. For instance, in many Middle Eastern countries, or in a South Asian country like Pakistan, uh, homosexual marriages are not allowed. So you cannot have there are certain family structures that are allowed. There are others that are not allowed. In Pakistan, polygamy is allowed. In the UK, we refer to it as bigamy, and it is considered to be illegal. So again, that has a lot to do with your ethnicity. Moreover, another way ethnicity can influence a person's behavior is through the family structures that are common in certain ethnic backgrounds. For instance, Geoffrey Driver noted that families in the West Indies are matrifocal. Families in the West Indies, they're matrifocal. What does the word matrifocal mean over here? Meaning they're headed by women. This change in family dynamics influences a person's identity. For example, women, there would be more independent. Women, that is, West Indies would be more independent, and the men would hold fewer patriarchal values. This can also be exemplified through other cultures. For instance, polygamous marriages are common in certain nations such as Tibet. Polygamous and Yeah, such as Tibet, where polyandry is common practice. What is polyandry? Polyandry is one man, no, polyandry is one woman marrying many men, right? So one woman, many husbands, we refer to that as polyandry, and one man, many wives, we refer to that as polygamy. So this showcases that ethnicity can lead to a behavioral change in individuals and can influence their way of living and consequently their identity as well. However, such acts and family diversity aren't common in every part of the world. For instance, bigamy is illegal in UK, having more than one partners at a time, which limits the ethnic practices of certain cultures such as multiple marriages in Islam. So even when Islam allows multiple marriages, if you are in the UK, you cannot legally have more than one partner at a time. So lastly, ethnicity also influences an individual's identity, as there are different kinds of values. There are different kind of values promoted in different cultures. For example, the importance of education. Now, Asians seem to be putting in a lot of influence, putting in a lot of emphasis on their child's education. For instance, the importance of education is reinforced more in Asian households in contrast to Western cultures. This results in some ethnic cultures having richer cultural capital than others, giving them an upper edge compared to other ethnic groups. This is exemplified by Chua's study on tiger moms. Tiger moms in China. This is interesting. You might as well Google this after your paper. So there are mothers who take a deep interest in their child's education, and therefore their children are able to do better in educational activities than their counterparts. This increased benefit of ethnic values demonstrates the importance of ethnicity in individuals' lives. Let's conclude this real quick. To conclude, it should be clear that ethnicity plays an important role in influencing one's identity. However, it is up to the individual if they want to adhere to their own cultural values or adapt to new identities. Moreover, as structuralists claim, the role institutional structures in defining an individual's social identity within a society cannot be ignored. So you're writing down both the sides, right? An analysis over here. Additionally, it should also be noted that ethnicity isn't the only factor influencing one's behavior, but factors such as your gender, your age, your social class, they also overlap They also what's wrong? So yeah, they also overlap with each other and their roles are interconnected, which makes the experience of every individual distinct from one another. Hence, it would be too deterministic to side with either of the arguments. Now, this is one way through which you could answer this question. There are many other ways too. I'm sure there are better ways too. Is this a model answer? No, this is not. Is this a sample answer? No, this is not. Will this answer help you score in the top level or the top band? I think yes. The word count over here is approximately 1,140 words. Uh, I suggest your answer should be somewhere around 1,000 words, right? Somewhere, give or take 1,000 words would work for you. So yeah, like I said, I already feel that I've taken a lot of time. I just quickly move on to the next question. That is question number 5. See, I'm explaining both question number 4 and question number 5 in your CAIE. You, in your examination, when you're sitting for your examination, you either have to opt for question number 4 or you have to opt for question number 5. I repeat, do any one question in them. There are very clear instructions that you have on your paper too. But yeah, so evaluate the view that practical factors are the most important influence on choice of research method. Now read this question again. Think of the points that you could write down in support of this. Think of the points that you could write down against this, and then I'd start explaining it to you. You might as well pause this here. All right. So the question reads, evaluate the view that practical factors are the most important influence on choice of research method. Now, if you have covered the syllabus well, you'd know when you study about the choice of research methods, you are asked about, I mean, there are 3 methods that are typically taught to students. 1, practical factors; 2, theoretical factors; number 3, ethical factors. So evaluate the view that practical factors are the most important. So very simple. You write down in support of the argument, right? You write down all the good things about practical factors being the most important influence on the choice of research method. And in contrast, you'd write down about other factors such as theoretical factors and your ethical factors. So to begin with the introduction here, there are many different factors that sociologists need to consider when conducting a research. Notable ones include the theoretical, ethical, and practical factors. While some sociologists claim that all methods are significant for a researcher, others argue that practical factors are the most important influence on research methods. Now, we're starting off with the idea that practical factors play the most important role here, right? So, to begin with, one practical factor may be the resources available to the researcher. The resources that are available to the researcher is resources, or the funding is, of course, and it's, of course, a practical factor. This includes money, time, etc. If a sociologist does not have the resources available to research a particular topic, then they naturally would not choose that topic for their subject. If a sociologist would not consider this, then they would be stuck with resource intensive and difficult tasks ahead of them. So you need to be pretty careful when you're choosing a topic before you conduct your research. For example, Peter Burrow's adolescent development study took around 10 years and 30 student investigators to conduct. This would not be practically possible for many researchers, and so they would avoid something like this. So research, a longitudinal research that took 10 years, not everyone would have the time and the resources, the time and the funds, the money, collectively referred to as resources, to be able to do this. This would not be practically possible for many researchers, and so they would avoid something like this, like it. Therefore, practical factors become the most important influence on the choice of research method. That said, the Peterborough adolescent study was held showing that practical factors are not impossible to overcome. Now, you're again writing down that we understand that this might be a very important, the most important factor, which is a practical factor. Nonetheless, it's not something that you cannot overcome. Number 2, sociologists argue that money is more difficult of a resource to gain than time. However, there are many sociological researchers that require more monetary backing than the researcher is able to afford. This would naturally lead to the researcher avoiding research that would need a lot of their own money. If a research is being funded, it would still be difficult since the sociologist would then need to cater to their funding body. Of course, when you are to cater to the funding, if there's someone who's funding you, they'd have some or the other involvement to some degree or other. They would have the involvement in in the choice of your topic, and not only the choice of your topic, again, the research procedure, the findings of the research too. So let's just say I want to conduct a research on something, and I want to conduct a research on on gadgets, right? I want to conduct a research on gadgets. I want to conduct a research on food, and the funding agency that I'm expecting to fund this isn't ready to do so. In that case, what do you think? Don't you think that's a practical issue? It is. So, oftentimes the priority of the funding body differs widely from those of the researcher, meaning that the topic of research would undergo changes in order to be approved. In order to avoid this, a practical factor of money becomes incredibly important. However, to call it the most important factor would be to undermine the other factors which affect research as well. Moving on to the third point, another practical factor may be access to the sample or group. You having access to the sample or the group that you want to conduct a research on. Let's just say I want to conduct a research on someone, and I deep down inside want to conduct research on someone, and I know that having access to that group to be able to collect data is not a very easy job, which again is a practical factor. So this means that sociologists would be unable to conduct a study on those people and would hence choose a different, more accessible sample group and topics. An example of this is a person wanting to study a deviant group, such as a gang, which would not allow researchers to get involved. Practically speaking, a researcher would not be able to choose them for a topic due to them having gatekeepers. They would instead have to go with a group that wouldn't be hostile or closed off. That said, even this practical factor can be overcome eventually, such as Venkatesh was able to gained the trust of a Chicago gang and was able to conduct longitudinal research on them for several years on end. This is amazing. You might as well want to Google this, type Sudhir Venkatesh. In bracket, you might as well write down gang leader for a day. You YouTube this, you'd come across I believe, a 7-minute video. That would give you an amazing insight by Venkatesh himself. So moving on. However, now you've written down in support, you've written down in support, you've written down in support, and now you are changing sides, moving on towards other factors. However, theoretical factors are arguably just as important as practical factors. It is argued by many sociologists that humans are not machines, and that numerical or quantitative data will not take into account the nuances and complexities of human emotions. Weber, a social action theorist, argued that you can only understand society if you're able to understand the people that make up society. That will be done via first trying to collect enough qualitative data to make generalizations about the way people behave. This is referred to as Verstehen or understanding. Without understanding humans, studying social behavior would arguably not lead to any solid result. Therefore, sociologists such as Weber support the use of qualitative methods. This is a theoretical concern. Practical factors aside, this is a theoretical concern, full stop. Practical factors aside, sociologists supporting Weber would try to gain firsthand through qualitative methods, focusing less on practical factors and more on the sociological beliefs and theories. That said, gaining firsthand is a very time-consuming process, so even now researchers would have to focus on the practical aspects of it. Moving on, number 2, in regard to theoretical factors, the use of qualitative data can be discussed as a negative context as well. Now, let me remind you, qualitative data is typically advocated by interpretativists, whereas quantitative data is typically advocated, supported, or backed by positivists. So in regard to theoretical factors, the use of qualitative data can be discussed in a negative context as well. Some sociologists point out that qualitative data cannot be replicated easily. Since in most scenarios collecting it are unique in some way or the other, this means that it lacks standardization as well, since the process might be completely different for each participant. These two factors combine and lead to qualitative data lacking reliability. Due to this, many positivists believe that the weaknesses are too big to be ignored and that it is not the best way of studying human behavior. This means that overall they would prefer using research methods that collect quantitative numerical data. This would be their priority and not a practical factor. However, even then practical factors would still be important, since without them a research could not even be conducted. Unless they kept in mind resources and group access, their research would naturally become unsuccessful. Now, I could explain this to you in detail, but I see this video has already taken too long. Hence, I'm just rushing through this. Furthermore, ethical factors should also be considered. So we spoke about, there were 3 paragraphs, and there was an introduction, then there were 3 paragraphs in support of for practical factors. Then we moved on to the flip side of the argument, and we wrote down 2 paragraphs that explained how theoretical factors are important. Now we're finally moving on towards ethical factors. Furthermore, ethical factors should also be considered. When conducting a research, unless the sociologists were to be mindful of ethics, they might end up causing severe harm to participants. So for both physical and psychological peace of mind, ethical factors become very significant. Roy Wallace, for example, wanted to study members of the religious group of Scientology. However, since they did not want it to be researched, he changed his research method to instead focus on old members who had left the group already. Due to the ethics of deception and consent, he was not able to honestly study the main group he wanted to study. However, some researchers break ethical guidelines easily and don't think of them as important. For those sociologists, practical factors would be far more important than ethical factors. The next point, that is not the next point, the conclusion, we're finally bringing it to an end. In conclusion, although practical factors are important, it would be difficult to call them more important than everything else. A researcher would choose a method that would holistic in a holistic manner, right? In a wholesome manner. A researcher would choose a method that would holistically cater to their topic instead of choosing something based only on practicality. So you see how this is around 950 words. Like I said, I could take longer to explain this to you. Nonetheless, this was just an attempt to walk you through the no, not the May, the March 2024 paper. Read your questions thoroughly, keep a check on, uh, keep a check on the watch that is there in the examination hall, and do not forget to brainstorm. Uh, Ideally, use block paragraphs. Go through the video on how the examiner marks you in section A. That would help you a lot. And do not stress. I hope this has been helpful, and wishing you all the best for your paper. Thank you.